Please, help me, sir. The words cracked as they left Selina Brooks's mouth, thin and shaking, like glass about to shatter. She dropped to her knees on the polished marble floor of the Argentum, her fingers clutching the tailored pant leg of Alexander Grant, the billionaire whose name carried more weight in this city than most laws. The room froze. No one touched Alexander Grant without permission. Not senators, not donors, not family, and certainly not a maid. Selina's chest burned as she tried to pull in air. Rainwater soaked her black and white uniform, plastering the fabric to her skin. Her short curls clung to her temples. One shoe was gone. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold on. Alexander looked down at her. At 45, he was a man shaped by control. Steel gray eyes, a face carved by discipline, not softness. He had built empires by knowing when to act and when to wait. His silence was feared more than most men's anger. He did not push her away. He studied her, really studied her, and then spoke in a voice so calm it cut through the tension like a blade. "Who is coming?" Selina swallowed. Her throat felt raw, scraped by fear and running and something worse. "He's coming for me," she whispered. "He says I belong to him. He has a badge, but he hurts people. He hurts me." A murmur rippled through the room. Alexander's head of security, Cole, had already risen from his seat near the wall, posture alert, eyes flicking toward the entrance. Alexander lifted one finger. "Stop." Selina's vision blurred. Her wrists throbbed. Beneath the sleeve of her uniform, bruises bloomed in ugly shades of purple and yellow, fresh and old. A quiet record of survival. Only minutes earlier, she had been in her apartment. The lock had rattled first, then the door shook once, twice wood splintering under the force of a boot. Selina had jumped from the couch, heart slamming against her ribs. She barely had time to grab her bag before the door gave way. Raymond Thorne stood there, rain slicking his jacket, eyes wild. "You stupid girl," he snarled, shoving her back. "You think you can run from me? You think you can steal from me?" She had raised her hands instinctively, and that was when he grabbed her wrist, twisting hard enough that she cried out. "You're nothing without me," he hissed. "Open your mouth and I'll bury you." Pain flared. Fear threatened to pin her to the floor. Then something inside her snapped. She shoved him harder than she knew she could. Raymond stumbled, crashing into the kitchen table. A lamp shattered. He swore. Lunging again, Selina ran, barefoot down the stairs. Into the rain, through traffic and noise and terror. She didn't know why she ran toward the Argentum, only that she knew who owned it. She knew who sat at the top. She knew he was dangerous, and somehow, she knew that was exactly why she might survive. Back in the dining room, Alexander reached down and placed 2 fingers lightly against Selina's shoulder. The contact was brief, deliberate, grounding. "Get her a towel," he said. The command was quiet, absolute. A server hurried forward, draping a thick white towel around Selina's shoulders. She clutched it like a lifeline. Then the doors burst open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and asphalt and rage. "Selina!" Detective Raymond Thorne strode inside, soaked, furious, flashing his badge like a weapon. "Get away from him. Now." Alexander didn't stand. He turned his head slowly, regarding Raymond as one might regard a stain on a cuff. "Do you have business here?" Alexander asked. "She's my wife." Raymond snapped. "She stole evidence. I'm taking her in." "She's a member of my staff," Alexander replied. "And you're interrupting a private dinner." Raymond stepped closer, eyes locked on Selina. "You don't get to block police business." Alexander rose. The movement was unhurried, controlled. When he reached his full height, the room felt smaller. "You came into my establishment," Alexander said, tracked a terrified woman, and raised your voice. Raymond laughed once, sharp and ugly. "She's lying." Alexander's gaze dropped to the bruises visible at Selina's wrist, then lifted again. "I didn't ask," he said, "and I don't care." Raymond's patience snapped. He lunged. It happened fast. Raymond grabbed for Selina's arm, trying to wrench her free. Chairs scraped back. Someone shouted. Selina screamed as pain shot up her shoulder. Alexander moved. He stepped between them in a single stride, shoving Raymond back with a force that sent him stumbling. "That was your last mistake," Alexander said, voice low. Raymond swung, a wild punch aimed at Alexander's jaw. It never landed. Cole and another guard were on him instantly. One pinned Raymond's arm, the other drove him back against a column. Raymond fought, spitting curses, trying to break free. "Get your hands off me," he roared. "You have no authority." "Enough," Alexander said. The word cut through the chaos. "Remove him." Alexander continued. "If he resists, restrain him. If he escalates, end it." Cole nodded once. They dragged Raymond toward the doors as he thrashed, his threats dissolving into fury and fear. "This isn't over," he shouted. "You hear me? I'll come back with warrants." The doors closed. Silence fell again, deeper this time. Selina sagged, strength draining now that the danger had been forced away. Alexander turned to her. "Come with me," he said. She looked up, eyes glassy. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't," he replied. "You asked for help. That mattered." Later, in the back of a black town car gliding through the wet streets of Manhattan, Selina sat wrapped in a blanket, staring at her hands. They still shook. Alexander sat across from her, watching the city lights smear across the windows. His phone buzzed with messages he didn't read. He had spent his life choosing battles carefully. But when a woman ran to him bleeding and afraid and begged, some things weren't strategy. Some things were vows, and he had already made one. If Selina's fear and courage moved you, please tap like and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because someone near you might be hearing this story at the very same moment. The silence inside the town car was thick, broken only by the soft hum of tires on wet pavement. Selina sat curled in the far corner of the back seat, wrapped in a heavy blanket that still smelled faintly of citrus and starch. Her fingers gripped the fabric as if it were the last thread keeping her together. Alexander Grant sat across from her, legs crossed, one arm draped over the leather armrest. The city lights outside reflected against the tinted windows, streaks of gold and red sliding across his sharp features. He wasn't looking at her, at least not directly, but she could feel his attention in the air between them. He had barely said a word since they left the Argentum. No demands, no questions, just that steady, unreadable expression. Selina kept her eyes down, watching the rain bead on the window, watching the world blur past. She still hadn't processed what she had done. She had run. She had fought back. She had clung to a man whose name was whispered in elite circles, feared and respected in equal measure, and he had helped her. She didn't know why. "You're bleeding," he said at last, breaking the silence. His voice was smooth but sharp, like silk pulled over steel. Selina blinked. "What?" He reached into the compartment beside him and pulled out a compact first aid kit. He flipped it open with one hand and removed an antiseptic wipe. Then, without asking, he leaned forward and gently took her hand. Selina flinched, instinctively trying to pull back. "I'm not him," he said softly. Her shoulders stiffened, but she let him take her hand. The touch of the alcohol stung against the torn skin on her knuckles. She winced but said nothing. "Your wrist is likely sprained," he continued, "from when he grabbed you." She nodded. "He's done it before." Alexander didn't respond immediately. He finished cleaning the cut, then wrapped her wrist in gauze with clinical precision. "You fought back," he said finally. "I had to." Her voice was quiet. "He said he'd kill me, that if I ever told anyone, he'd make sure I disappeared. He's connected. He knows judges. Internal affairs. Cops like him always do." Alexander sat back, studying her. "But you didn't just run. You came to me." "I didn't know where else to go," she said truthfully. "You were the only name I knew that scared people like him." The billionaire tilted his head slightly. "And how did you know my name scared people like him?" Selina hesitated. "One of the waitstaff told me. Said you don't make threats. You make examples." That earned the barest twitch of a smile from him, gone in an instant. "I'm not a good man, Miss Brooks," he said. "You should know that now." "I'm not looking for a good man," she whispered. "Just a safe place." It got a created doing. The car turned off the main road, entering a quieter neighborhood lined with trees and stone walls. Beyond the windshield, The wrought iron gates of an estate loomed large, flanked by cameras and 2 security guards in raincoats. Selena's breath hitched. "This is your home?" "One of them." The gates opened without a word. The car followed the winding drive through a landscaped lawn, stopping in front of a sprawling stone mansion, old money architecture, understated in the way that only immense wealth could afford. Cole was waiting outside, umbrella in hand. He opened the door before the car came to a full stop. "Boss," he said with a curt nod. "Perimeters secure, no signs of tailing." "Good," Alexander replied, stepping out first. He turned and offered a hand to Selena. She stared at it for a beat, then placed hers in his. The moment she stood, the cold night air slapped her across the face. Her wet clothes clung to her skin, making her shiver. She clutched the blanket tighter. Alexander led her up the steps, past the grand oak doors, and into warmth. The foyer was massive double-height ceilings, a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a museum, dark hardwood floors gleaming with polish. But everything was quiet, dimly lit, not a house made for show, but for power. A house that had seen deals, secrets, and silences. "Follow me," he said. Selena obeyed, shoes squelching slightly against the floor. He led her up the wide staircase, past portraits she didn't recognize, men in military uniforms, women in gowns from other centuries. They stopped in front of a door. He opened it. "This will be your room for tonight," he said. "There are clean clothes in the closet. Use whatever you need. A doctor will check your injuries in the morning." Selena stepped inside. The room was larger than her entire apartment. The bed was king-sized, dressed in soft grays and creams. A fireplace sat quietly in the corner. She turned to him. "Why are you doing this?" He looked at her for a long moment. Then, softly, "Because you asked." He stepped back into the hall. "Rest. We'll talk tomorrow." She hesitated. "Mr. Grant." "Alexander," he corrected. She nodded slowly. "Thank you." He didn't reply. Just closed the door. Alone now, Selena locked the door out of habit, then dragged an armchair in front of it. Her body ached, her heart thudded, but she was alive. She moved to the bed, the blanket still around her shoulders, and collapsed onto the mattress. The scent of the pillow was expensive leather and cedar and something darker. She let her eyes close, and for the first time in weeks, she slept without fear. Downstairs, Alexander stepped into his study. Cole waited by the fireplace. "You want me to dig into the detective?" "Already have people on it," Alexander said. He poured himself a scotch. "But I want it faster. I want every file, every cover-up, every person who's protected him." "You think it goes deep?" "I know it does." He turned toward the window. "A man like that doesn't beat women because he's angry. He does it because he thinks he can." Cole nodded. "Understood." Alexander swirled the amber liquid in his glass, his jaw tight. "She trusted me," he murmured. "I don't know why that matters." Cole said nothing. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing over the estate like a quiet promise. Selena had asked for help. Now she had it. And Alexander Grant wasn't the kind of man who gave something for free. He protected what was his. And tonight, that included her. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, filtered by sheer curtains that fluttered in the early morning breeze. Selena stirred beneath soft cotton sheets she never imagined touching, surrounded by silence too heavy to be peace. She woke slowly, her body aching in places she hadn't noticed the night before. Her wrist throbbed beneath the gauze. Her lower back radiated dull pain from where she'd hit the floor during the struggle with Raymond. But more than that, it was the weight in her chest, a kind of bruised stillness that held her down. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then she saw the fireplace, the deep gray walls, the art that wasn't just decoration but investment. And the memory came back, the pleading, the touch, the billionaire's voice cutting through chaos like a blade. She sat up too quickly, dizziness blooming behind her eyes. A soft knock startled her. She turned. "Come in," she said hoarsely. The door opened just enough for a tall woman in her 50s to step inside, elegant, severe, dressed in black slacks and a cream blouse buttoned all the way up. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled into a neat bun. "I'm Eleanor," she said briskly. House manager. Mr. Grant asked me to bring you something to wear. She handed over a fresh bundle, leggings, a soft blue sweater, undergarments, even warm socks. Everything smelled like lavender and order. Selina mumbled her thanks. There's breakfast waiting downstairs when you're ready, Eleanor added. And a doctor. A doctor? You need one, the woman said, nodding at her wrist. Mr. Grant insists. Selina held her gaze. Is this how he always treats people in trouble? No, Eleanor said simply. You're the exception. The door shut quietly behind her. Selina got dressed slowly. The clothes fit perfectly, which unnerved her. How had they known her size? Downstairs, the house opened up like a secret. She passed a grand piano, shelves of leather-bound books, and framed black and white photographs of people she didn't recognize, not celebrities, but real people. Family, soldiers, pioneers. In the dining room, a long table sat under a modern chandelier. A place had been set, fresh fruit, scrambled eggs, toast, and what smelled like real brewed coffee. A man stood beside the windows, his back to her, looking out onto the rain-drenched lawn. Alexander. Good morning, he said without turning. Morning, Selina said quietly. He finally turned to face her. He wore dark slacks and a navy pullover, no suit today. But he still looked every inch the man who owned half of New York's skyline. You slept? He asked. She nodded. Better than I have in a long time. He gestured to the food. Eat. She sat. He remained standing, hands in his pockets. I had Cole pull every record he could find on Raymond Thorne, Alexander said. There are gaps, too many transfers. Internal Affairs closed multiple complaints. All sealed. Selina's stomach knotted. I figured, she murmured. There's something else, he continued. Do you know a man named Marcus Fielding? She froze. Yes. He was Raymond's partner, reasoned. Fielding's been missing for 6 months. Officially on leave. Unofficially? Unofficially. He handed her a printout from his pocket. A police bulletin. Last seen days after submitting an anonymous report to a journalist. That journalist died in a hit-and-run 2 weeks later. Selina stared at the paper. Her breath caught. They're covering something, she whispered. Alexander nodded. I believe so. But I won't make assumptions until I see the evidence. She looked up. What do you mean? You mentioned a flash drive, files, proof. Selina swallowed. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table. I didn't bring it. It's hidden. Where? In a ventilation grate. My old apartment, back bedroom, under the radiator. Cole will retrieve it, Alexander said immediately. Selina hesitated. What are you going to do with it? Alexander walked to the sideboard, poured himself a coffee, and leaned against the counter. That depends on what's on it. But if what you've said is true, then this doesn't just end with one dirty cop. I'm scared, she said. You should be, he replied. What you're part of now, what you've witnessed, it doesn't go away. They will come again. Not with rage next time. With lawyers. With stories. With character assassination. She blinked at him. And you still want to help me? I don't help people, he said plainly. I protect investments, and I don't like being threatened in my own restaurant. With Maid, Selina's lips parted, but then she saw something in his expression, something behind the sharpness, a flicker of something buried. You lost someone, didn't you? She asked. Alexander didn't move, but the air in the room shifted. My sister, he said. Emma, 19. She came to me once, told me she was scared of her boyfriend. I thought she was being dramatic. He sipped his coffee. She died 6 months later, pushed down a flight of stairs. They said it was an accident. It is backed, Selina whispered. I'm sorry. He shrugged. It doesn't change anything. But it taught me this. When someone begs for help, you don't ask for credentials. They stood in silence. Then, a knock at the front door echoed through the house. Cole's voice called faintly from the hall. Boss. You'll want to see this. Alexander motioned for Selina to stay seated. He stepped into the foyer. Outside, on the front step, was a small box. No return label. Just his name written in thick black marker. Cole held it carefully. Scanned for explosives. Clean. Alexander opened the box. Inside, a single item, one of Selena's earrings, blood on the backing, and a note. You think you've won. You haven't. She's mine. Alexander's jaw tightened. He turned to Cole. Lock this place down. Double security. Nobody in or out. Cole nodded. Understood. Alexander stared out into the trees beyond his gate. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The estate shifted before her eyes. Selena watched through the second-floor window as black SUVs pulled into the circular drive. One after another, each carrying men in dark tactical gear. Silent. Efficient. Controlled. Like a security agency, but more private. More dangerous. Down below. Cole spoke into a headset, directing them as if they were part of a well-rehearsed drill. The gates closed. The cameras panned. 2 men stood at every exit. Drones buzzed above the trees. Selena had seen police raids before, but this wasn't law enforcement. This was war preparation, a war she never meant to start. She backed away from the window, her hands trembling. The sweater Eleanor had given her suddenly felt too tight, too clean for what was happening. Her body still ached from the bruises Raymond had left. Her wrist, though wrapped neatly, throbbed with every heartbeat. She turned as the door opened behind her. It was Alexander. He didn't knock. He didn't ask. He simply stepped inside, carrying the blood-stained earring in one hand and the note in the other. Selena froze. Her breath hitched. You recognize this? He asked, his voice even. Her eyes dropped to the earring. It was hers. The gold, one part of the only pair she'd ever bought with her own paycheck. Her first month working at the Argentum, she nodded. I lost it during the struggle. In the apartment, Alexander held her gaze. He found it, and he left it on my doorstep, along with a warning. Selena swallowed hard. He knows where I am. He knows where I am, Alexander corrected, and he's bold enough to test my reach. Should I leave? She asked suddenly. I don't want you in danger because of me. He blinked. You think I helped you because it was convenient? No, I didn't think this would get worse. It will get worse, he said flatly. But not for you. She folded her arms across her chest, shivering. I don't want anyone else getting hurt. Alexander took a step forward. His presence was like pressure in the room, sharp, heavy, undeniable. You already got hurt, he said. The moment he laid hands on you, this stopped being about choices. It became consequence. His words landed like anchors. A silence stretched between them before he spoke again, softer this time. Cole's running a sweep of your apartment building now. We'll have the drive you hid within the hour. Was no have. She nodded, but her thoughts were already racing ahead. What if it's not enough? She whispered. What if the files aren't enough to bring him down? Then we make it enough. You say that like it's easy. It's not, but it's necessary. He turned toward the door. Come downstairs. There's someone I want you to meet. Eye fast. Selena followed him through the wide hallway and down the staircase, past the gallery of old black and white portraits she now suspected were family Grant ancestors, each of them staring down with quiet power. In the study, a woman in a navy blue suit sat on the edge of a leather armchair. Early 50s. Sharp brown eyes. The kind of woman who wore silence like a badge. This is Valerie Trent, Alexander said. Former federal prosecutor. Now my legal counsel. Valerie rose, extending her hand. Selena. It's good to meet you. Under better circumstances, I'd say welcome. Selena shook her hand hesitantly. I've read Cole's report, Valerie said, pulling out a tablet from her bag. Between the bruises, the break-in, and your sworn statement, we already have a case for immediate protection. But going after Thorne? That's going to take more. Selena's mouth was dry. What kind of more? Concrete evidence, Valerie replied. Digital records, audio, video, and someone willing to testify. Selena looked at Alexander, then back to her. You want me to testify? It won't be easy, Valerie said. But if we want to end this, really end it, you'll have to speak. Not just to a lawyer, not just in court, but publicly. You'll be a face, a voice, and you'll be hunted for it. Alexander stepped beside her. You won't be alone. Selena's knees weakened slightly. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. I need to think, she whispered. Valerie nodded. Of course. But not too long. Once we move fast. Selena turned away, crossing the room to stand by the fireplace. The flames crackled softly. Outside, more guards took their posts. She could feel the house tightening its grip, safe, yes, but also closing in. I've always been the girl who stays quiet, she murmured. Who just takes it. At school, at work, at home. I was taught to survive, not to fight. Alexander spoke behind her, low and steady. You didn't run to survive. You ran to fight. You just didn't know it yet. She turned, her eyes glassy. Why do you care so much? She asked. Why risk this much for someone like me? Alexander looked at her for a long moment. Then he answered. Voice rawer than she'd ever heard. Because someone didn't care when it mattered most, he said, and I live with that. A pause. Then he added, more quietly. I don't want to do it again. Selena said nothing, but in her chest, something shifted. A wall. Cracking. A seed. Planted. Maybe she could speak. Maybe she had to. From the hallway, a voice called out. Boss, we got it. Cole appeared with a small black flash drive held between two fingers. It was right where she said. Alexander took it. He glanced at Selena. You ready to see what's on it? She hesitated. Then she nodded. I am. Alexander turned to Valerie. Get the encryption tools. IMC. As they stepped into his private office, the door closed behind them, and somewhere deep in Selena's bones, she knew. This wasn't just about Raymond anymore. This was about a system, and she had just stepped into the center of it. The office was sealed the moment Alexander closed the door. Not locked, sealed. The difference mattered to him. The room was smaller than Selena expected, tucked behind the main study, windowless and soundproof. One wall was lined with screens, another with books that looked old enough to remember wars. The air smelled faintly of leather, ozone, and coffee gone cold. Alexander set the flash drive on the desk between them like it was a loaded weapon. Valerie moved first. She pulled a slim laptop from her briefcase, connected a small black device, then slid on a pair of glasses she didn't need but always wore when things became serious. Before we do this, she said, looking at Selena, I want you to understand something very clearly. Selena nodded, her throat tight. Once we open that drive, Valerie continued, there's no going back. What's on it will implicate people who don't lose easily. People who ruin lives quietly. If you choose to walk away, this is the last clean moment you'll have. Alexander said nothing. He stood with his arms folded, watching Selena, not pressuring, not rescuing. Waiting. Selena looked at the flash drive. She thought of her apartment door splintering inward, of Raymond's breath in her face, of the earring torn from her ear, now returned like a threat. I already crossed the line, she said softly. I just didn't know where it was. She reached out and pushed the drive toward Valerie. Open it. Valerie didn't hesitate. The first file loaded slowly, lines of encrypted code scrolling across the screen. She typed commands with quick, practiced movements. The room filled with the quiet clicking of keys and the faint hum of the system. Then folders appeared. Dozens of them. Dates, names, initials. Alexander leaned forward. Start with financials. Valerie clicked into a folder labeled RT, transfers. Selena felt her stomach drop. Bank statements filled the screen. Offshore accounts, shell corporations, regular deposits that didn't match a detective's salary. Jesus, Valerie muttered. This isn't just corruption. This is organized. As Alexander's jaw tightened. Scroll. Audio files came next. Valerie clicked one. Raymond's voice filled the room, distorted but unmistakable. You keep the girls quiet, I keep the cops away. That's the deal. Selena flinched, her fingers digging into the arm of the chair. Another file. Another recording. You mess this up, I'll pin it on you. Dead girls don't testify. Alexander closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something had hardened behind them, something colder than anger. How long have you had this? He asked Selena. 3 weeks, she whispered. I didn't even know what half of it meant. I just knew it was wrong. And dangerous. Valerie pulled up another folder. These names: judges, city council members, internal affairs officers. This goes far beyond Thorne. Selina stared at the screen. That's why he hunted me. Not because I left him, because I could destroy all of them. Yes, Valerie said quietly. And now they know that too. A knock sounded at the door. Cole entered without waiting. Boss, we've got movement. Alexander didn't look away from the screen. Where? Unmarked car circling the perimeter. Not local. Plates are federal issue clones. Valerie stiffened. That was fast. Selina's heart began to race. They're already here? They were probably watching Raymond, Alexander said. When he failed, they moved to you. He straightened. Cole. Rotate security. No patterns. I want eyes on every approach. Already doing it. Cole hesitated, then added, there's something else. Raymond Thorne checked into the ER 20 minutes ago. Broken ribs. Concussion. Selina looked up sharply. He's alive? Yes, Cole said, and he's talking. Alexander exhaled slowly. To who? Internal affairs. Valerie cursed under her breath. If he's flipping, he'll try to paint Selina as unstable, or worse. Alexander turned to Selina. You're not leaving this house. I wasn't planning to. That wasn't a request. She nodded. Valerie closed the laptop. We need to copy this drive and split it. Redundancy. If something happens to one of us. The truth survives, Alexander finished. Do it. As Valerie worked, Selina stood and walked toward the bookshelf along the wall. Her eyes traced the spines: history, philosophy, law, names she recognized from school and names she didn't. Do you believe in justice? She asked suddenly. Alexander looked at her. I believe in consequences. That's not the same thing. No, he agreed. Justice is what people hope for. Consequences are what actually change behavior. She nodded slowly. Raymond used to say the law was a weapon, that the people who held it decided who deserved protection. And what do you think now? Alexander asked. I think, she said carefully, that the law failed me, but people didn't. Valerie glanced up from her work. That's why your voice matters, Selina. Not as a victim, as a witness. Selina swallowed. Witnesses get destroyed. Only if they stand alone, Alexander said. She turned to him. And what happens when this is over? When the cameras leave? When the headlines move on? Alexander held her gaze. Then you'll still be standing, with more protection than you've ever had. Oh, that's not what I meant. He understood anyway. When this is over, he said quietly, you'll decide who you are. Not him. Not them. Valerie removed the drive and placed it into a secure case. We move tomorrow. Press first, then subpoenas. We don't give them time to bury this. Selina felt the weight of it settle in her chest, not fear this time, but gravity. She had spent her life being quiet, invisible, careful. That life was gone. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Alexander looked toward the door, then back at her. Get some rest. Tonight may be the last quiet one for a while. Selina nodded. As she left the room, she realized something terrifying and strange all at once. For the first time, she wasn't running away from the danger. She was walking straight into it. Selina couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest bed, staring at the ornate ceiling, listening to the steady tick of a grandfather clock down the hallway. Time passed slowly in this house, not because of boredom, but because of awareness. Every creak of wood, every breath between shadows. She felt watched. Not by anyone in the house, but by something greater. The truth itself, maybe. The weight of what she now carried. The copy of the drive was in Alexander's vault. The original had already been sent out encrypted, compartmentalized. Valerie's team would make sure multiple journalists received it at the same time tomorrow. There would be no way to smother it once it was out. Selina had asked if they could blur her name, keep her identity out of it. Valerie had been honest. You're the one who ran, the one who hid it, the one who speaks. They won't let you stay anonymous. That ship sailed the minute you touched that drive. She'd nodded, quietly, and now here she was, staring into the dark. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. She sat up. Yes. The door opened just enough for Alexander to appear. Sleeves rolled to the elbows, the light behind him painting the sharp lines of his face in gold and shadow. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "You either?" "No." He hesitated. "Come with me. Just for a walk." Selina slipped on a cardigan and followed him barefoot down the hallway. They moved through the house in silence until they reached the conservatory, a long glass room attached to the west wing, filled with indoor trees and quiet moonlight. Rain tapped gently on the roof above, casting shadows that shimmered across the floor. Alexander walked to the center and sat on a bench surrounded by ferns. Selina joined him. He was quiet for a long time. She let the silence breathe. Then he said, "I once built a fund to try and reform the system." She blinked at him. "You did?" "Years ago," he nodded. "Donated millions to transparency campaigns, legal aid for low-income defendants, community oversight groups." "What happened?" He looked at her. "One of the DAs I funded ended up burying evidence in a major case, protected a donor. The hypocrisy went public. Everything collapsed. Every inch of progress burned overnight." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I told myself I'd never invest in people again. Only structure. Power. The kind that doesn't bleed when it's hit." Selina studied him, quiet. "But you helped me." "I didn't see you as a cause," he said. "You weren't a headline. You were a woman in pain. And I—" He stopped. "I couldn't look away." She looked down at her lap, fingers tightening in her sleeves. "I used to think the only way to stay safe was to stay quiet," she murmured. "But all silence ever did was make me small, invisible." Alexander turned to her. "You were never small." "Oh." Her throat tightened. She stood and walked toward the tall glass windows. Beyond them, the world was still. A temporary pause in a storm that hadn't truly started. "When I was 15, she said softly. "Raymond was the first adult who looked at me like I mattered. My mom had left. My aunt worked nights. He was a family friend, a cop, respectable. He brought me sandwiches, told me I was smart, beautiful." She swallowed. "By the time I realized what it was, I already believed I owed him something. That love meant survival, that control was care." She turned back to Alexander. And for the first time, she wasn't just angry. She was exposed. "Do you know what it's like to hate yourself for being fooled?" His eyes softened. "Yes," he said simply, and she believed him. They stood in the hush of glass and ferns and long shadows. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good," he said. "Only fools aren't. Everyone." She smiled faintly. "You're not what I expected. I never am." She crossed back to the bench, sat beside him again. "Tomorrow they'll see the drive," she said. "What if they don't believe it? What if they twist it?" "They will," he said. "Count on it. But the truth doesn't have to shout to be heard. It just has to survive. I never wanted to be the center of a story. No one who's worth believing ever does." She leaned her head back and exhaled. "I thought I was just a maid," she whispered. "Now I feel like a fuse." Alexander smiled, the first real one she'd seen. "Fuses don't destroy things, Selina. They light what's been waiting to burn." They sat in the conservatory until the sky began to pale. When they finally rose, neither said a word. But something had shifted between them, something unspoken, born not of romance, but of respect. A bond forged in silence, not promises. Tomorrow the world would know her name. Tonight, she was still his guest, still safe, and maybe, for the first time, no longer just surviving, but beginning. The knock came at 8:15 a.m. Selina stood in the grand foyer, watching through the arched front windows as two black sedans pulled up behind the security gate. No logos, no microphones, just two men and a woman in tailored coats, holding leather briefcases and clipped tension in their posture. "They're here," Cole said, stepping beside her. Selina nodded, her hands cold despite the sweater. "You trust them?" "No," Cole said bluntly. "But I don't need to trust them. I just need to watch their hands." Alexander descended the staircase behind her, dressed immaculately in charcoal gray. He walked with purpose, no hesitation, no visible concern. He moved like someone who had already anticipated every outcome. Valerie followed behind him, tapping something on a tablet. She handed Selina a phone. "This account is secure," Valerie said. "Use it for media contact only. If anything makes you uncomfortable, hand it to me or Cole immediately." Selina stared at the device. Holding it felt like holding a live wire. The front doors opened. The guests entered without needing to be announced. No cameras, no press badges. These were high-tier investigative journalists, serious, cautious, and already aware of how dangerous the story might be. "Miss Brooks," said the woman, shaking her hand with surprising warmth. "I'm Dana Riles, from the Tribune." The others followed Ken Martinez, from a national podcast on justice reform, and Malcolm Rhodes, a writer with The Beacon, known for uncovering police corruption in the Midwest. Selina's voice was small but steady. "Thank you for coming. We almost didn't believe the message," Dana said. "But then we saw what was on the drive." Alexander led them into the library. It was more formal than the study designed for impact, not comfort. The kind of room meant to make you feel small, unless you had something worth saying. Selina sat at the center of a long table. Alexander stayed behind her, silent but present. A signal. She took a breath, and then she spoke. It wasn't the clean, confident monologue she'd imagined. It was jagged, real, stops and starts, pauses where emotion caught in her throat. But she told them everything: how she met Raymond, how he manipulated her, the first time he hit her, the slow, sick normalization of his cruelty. She talked about the hidden flash drive, about Marcus Fielding's disappearance, about the veiled threats, the locked doors, the night she finally ran. They didn't interrupt. They took notes. Malcolm recorded audio. Dana asked questions, but gently. When it was over, Selina felt like she'd run a marathon underwater. Exhausted, weightless, hollow. Dana reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You're incredibly brave," she said. Selina didn't answer. She wasn't sure she believed that yet. By noon, the story was already moving. The Tribune released a special alert. Exclusive. Former NYPD detective implicated in abuse and corruption ring survivor breaks silence. Selina's face wasn't on the cover, but her name was, and it echoed louder than any photograph could. By 2 p.m., the podcast interview was trending. By 3, anonymous threats were already being filtered out by the estate's security software. Cole read one aloud. "You should have stayed quiet, Maid. He owned you. You're nobody." Selina looked at Alexander. "They're coming." "They already were," he said. "Now they're just louder." At 4 p.m., the NYPD held a press conference. A deputy commissioner with a polished accent and tight jaw denied the allegations, citing fabricated digital evidence, and claimed Raymond Thorne had filed a harassment complaint against Selina earlier that week. Valerie muttered. "They're trying to turn it. Standard playbook." "Do we respond?" Alexander asked. "Not yet. Let them dig themselves deeper." But Selina couldn't stop watching the screen. Raymond wasn't in the press conference, of course, but his name was spoken carefully, with the kind of curated concern designed to imply innocence without committing to it. "They're softening the fall," Selina said. "They know he's guilty, but they're still trying to protect the institution." "It's always about the institution," Alexander said. "One man can fall. The system can't afford to." At 6 p.m., Alexander stood on the stone balcony of the estate, looking out over the forest beyond. Selina joined him. "You did well today," he said. "I don't feel well." "You don't have to. You just have to keep moving," she sighed. "Do you think it'll make a difference?" Alexander looked at her. "You've already made one. You made it harder for them to hide." "I wanted the truth to come out," she said. "But I didn't expect to feel this exposed." He nodded. "Truth is heavy. You don't just carry it, you wear it. But it gets lighter the longer you walk with it." Selina leaned against the cold stone railing. Below them, the estate was alive with quiet activity. Guards, staff, lawyers arriving for late meetings. And yet, despite the movement, the hush in the air reminded her of something else. That moment before thunder breaks. A storm was coming, but this time, she wasn't alone. By morning, the counterattack had begun. Selina sat at the end of the long oak dining table, clutching a cup of untouched coffee as Cole laid out a stack of freshly printed documents and screenshots. Alexander paced behind him, silent, unreadable. Valerie sat across from Selina, tapping the armrest with her pen like a metronome ticking toward war. "They're targeting you," Cole said, flipping the first page. "Social media bots are flooding every post about your interview. Most of them trace back to shell accounts managed from one firm, Perkins Group." Selina blinked. "Who are they?" "Crisis management," Valerie answered, "which really means damage control for powerful people who get caught doing ugly things. They're expensive," Alexander added. "Someone is investing a lot to spin this." Selina glanced down. The online comments were brutal. "Gold-digging Maid wants a payout. Why now?" "Seems staged. She probably planted the files herself." Her stomach churned. "There's more," Cole said. "A blog popped up overnight, claiming you're not who you say you are, that you were fired from 2 previous jobs for theft." Selina's head snapped up. "That's a lie." "We know," Valerie said. "And we can prove it. But the story isn't about truth to them, it's about noise. Confuse the public. Muddy the facts." Selina's voice cracked. "I knew they'd come after me. I just didn't think it had happened so fast." Alexander spoke, calm but firm. "That's because you underestimated how threatened they are." Valerie leaned forward. "This is a distraction. A smokescreen. Stay focused on the next step." "Which is?" Selina asked. "Grand jury," she said. "We'll present the evidence formally. If they indict, Raymond and his associates will be pulled into court publicly." Selina exhaled slowly. "And what happens to me?" "You testify. You tell your story under oath. In front of strangers, with him watching me." "Yes," Valerie said. "And you do it because you're stronger than they ever thought you'd be." Silence fell. Then Alexander added, more softly, "And because if you don't, they win." By noon, the estate's gates opened for someone unexpected. Detective Nolan Reyes. Selina watched from the study window as he stepped out of a dark sedan, wearing civilian clothes and carrying nothing but a slim file. Cole met him halfway, hand resting on his sidearm until Alexander gave the nod to let him through. Nolan was younger than Selina remembered, maybe early 30s, Latino. Quiet eyes, wary posture. She met him in the conservatory, the same place where she had first truly let herself be honest. "I heard about the press," he said after a brief hello. "And I heard Internal Affairs tried to scrub your file from the record." "They did," she replied. "I guess I should be flattered." He handed her the file. "Inside are copies of everything Marcus Fielding submitted 6 months ago," he said. "He trusted me. Told me to keep them safe. I didn't understand why until now." 2. Selina opened the file slowly. Pages of notes, maps, photographs, names. "Why give this to me?" she asked. "Because the department already labeled you a liar. They'll say I fabricated this too. But if you're the one who brings it in front of the grand jury, it matters more." He lowered his voice. Marcus was scared. He said they were running girls through a warehouse in Flatbush, drugging them, selling silence. He got too close. Selina's fingers clenched the folder. "Did he survive?" Reyes shook his head. "I think he's dead, but I don't have proof." Selina swallowed hard. She felt a sick, rising heat in her chest. "Then this can't end with Raymond." "No," Reyes said. "He's just the rot we can see." Alexander entered quietly, having listened from the doorway. "We'll take it from here." Reyes looked at Selina. "You're not safe." "Not really. I hope you know that." "I do," she said, "but I'm not hiding." He gave a respectful nod, then turned to leave. Selina watched him go, then turned to Alexander. "We need to go public again. This time, with Marcus's files." "Too risky," Valerie said, entering from behind him. "We need to keep it for the grand jury." Selina looked between them. "No. I decide this, not you. I'm the one they tried to erase." The one they tried to buy. To scare. To shame. She held up the folder. I'm not holding anything back. Alexander studied her. Not dismissing. Not dominating. Just assessing. Finally, he nodded. Then we go bigger. Valerie sighed. I'll contact 60 minutes. They've been circling, Cole muttered. This is gonna get loud. Alexander glanced at Selena. Good. Let them hear every word. Good. That evening, as the sky turned amber and the wind pushed dead leaves across the lawn, Selena stood outside on the veranda. She wrapped her arms around herself, watching the city skyline glow in the distance. From here, it looked peaceful, but she knew what waited there. The courtroom, the press, the stairs, the men in suits who'd smile as they lied, and Raymond, somewhere, nursing his broken bones. Watching her rise, she wasn't afraid anymore, but she was ready for him to know this wasn't over. She wasn't his victim, she was the reckoning. The courtroom was colder than she expected, not in temperature, but in presence. The walls, high and gray, seemed to press inward. The benches were clean and empty, save for a few court officers and the clerk, all of them quiet, all of them watching. Selena sat at the witness table, her palms resting flat against the worn wood. A microphone stood in front of her, its red light blinking like a slow heartbeat. She could feel every second stretching. Valerie sat nearby. Not as counsel today, but as a shadow there to advise, not speak. The rules of the grand jury were different. No judge, no defense team, just the jurors, the district attorney, and the witness. The DA, Robert Ellison, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. Miss Brooks, we understand this is difficult, but I want to remind you you're protected under whistleblower provisions. Your testimony here is confidential until charges are filed. Selena gave a tight nod. Okay. Ellison tapped a pen against his legal pad. Let's begin with your relationship to Detective Raymond Thorne. She looked out toward the jurors. 12 faces, all anonymous, all blank. Their expressions gave away nothing, but she saw the shift in posture as she began to speak. I met Raymond when I was 15. He was a friend of my aunt. He told me I was special, that I could trust him. She recounted the grooming, the manipulation, the slow, careful way he separated her from people who might have helped. The jurors didn't flinch, but 2 of them leaned forward. He said love was about loyalty, about obedience. Ellison's voice was even. When did that relationship become violent? Selena looked at her lap. When I turned 18, that's when he stopped pretending. When I tried to leave, he made it clear I was his. She raised her left sleeve. The bruises had faded, but the memory hadn't. Ellison held up the flash drive. This device, did you copy its contents? Yes. I found it hidden inside Raymond's closet, taped beneath a false drawer. I don't know why I looked, but I knew there was more. Was he aware you had it? He wasn't, not at first, but when he realized it was gone, everything changed. She told them about the night of the escape. The door kicked open, the fists, the threat, then the run through rain, and the plea. Please, help me, sir. That line hovered in the room. Even Ellison paused. And Mr. Alexander Grant intervened? Yes. You understand how unusual that is? I do. But he didn't ask me to be here. I'm here because the truth matters. Ellison nodded. Let's move on to the recordings. He played the audio. Raymond's voice filled the courtroom again, ugly and raw. You keep the girls quiet. I keep the cops off your back. That's the deal. Gasps rippled through the jury box. One man covered his mouth. Selena closed her eyes. Hearing it never got easier. They played another. Then another. She watched the jurors closely. Saw the hardening of expressions. The realization. These weren't just internal affairs issues. These were crimes. Organized. Protected. Ellison laid out the money trails. The shell accounts. The names Marcus Fielding had collected before his disappearance. Then, he asked, Miss Brooks, did anyone ever tell you not to speak? Yes, she said. Raymond. Others. People who said I'd ruin lives. That I'd get hurt. Or worse. And why did you come forward anyway? She took a breath. Because no one ever saved me when I was young. And if I stayed silent, I'd be just like them. Watching. letting it happen again to someone else. Ellison paused, then nodded. No further questions. The forewoman of the jury, an older black woman with silver hair and a deep scar over one eyebrow, looked at Selina for a long, quiet moment. Then she simply said, "Thank you." Selina stepped down. Her knees shook slightly, but she didn't fall. Outside the courtroom, Valerie was waiting. She placed a hand on Selina's shoulder. "You did it." "No," Selina said. "Now they decide if it's enough." Alexander joined them a moment later, his suit immaculate, his face unreadable. "They'll indict," he said. "They'd be fools not to." Selina leaned against the marble column in the hallway. The building buzzed with restrained tension. "What if they don't?" she asked. "Then we go to war," Alexander replied calmly. "In the court of public opinion. On every screen, every paper, and they will beg for mercy by the time we're done." She looked up at him. "Why do you sound so certain?" "Because I've lived through people like Thorne. I've seen what happens when no one stops them. This time, they're going to answer." He stepped back as Cole approached, holding up a phone. "You need to see this." He handed it to Alexander, who tapped the screen once. Then he handed it to Selina. A video was playing. Someone had leaked part of her testimony, just her voice. The words, "I was taught to survive, not to fight." And then her face appeared. Selina Brooks, not a maid, not a runaway, a witness, a woman who refused to stay silent. Underneath the video, hashtags were trending. Number, "Believe Selina." Number, "Justice for Marcus." Number, "Clean the Blue." Selina looked up, her heart pounding. The system had struck first, but she had struck back, and now the world was watching. By the next morning, there was no more hiding. Selina stood in the master kitchen of the estate, watching the news broadcast over the counter-mounted screen as her own face flashed in the corner, smaller than the anchors, but unmistakable. They were no longer calling her the alleged victim. She had a name now, a voice, a presence. Alexander entered, coffee already in hand, dressed in a dark navy suit that mirrored the growing seriousness of their days. He nodded toward the TV. "They're holding back." "Two." "For how long?" Selina asked, her voice low. Alexander glanced at Valerie, who had appeared beside him like a shadow. "Not long," Valerie answered, setting down her tablet. "Their people inside Internal Affairs just leaked that Raymond Thorne has been placed on administrative leave. With full pension." Selina froze. "He's not suspended?" "Oh, no," Valerie said dryly. "They're protecting him, giving him time to clean his mess." Selina gripped the edge of the marble counter. "So that's their strategy? Stall until public anger fades?" Alexander took a sip of coffee. "That's always the strategy. But not this time." Before she could respond, Cole entered quickly from the side entrance. His face was harder than usual. "Package arrived," he said. "No label. Dropped off 5 minutes ago by a courier wearing NYPD blues. Said it was lost evidence. Security footage shows him walking away smiling." Alexander stiffened. "Where is it?" "Here." Cole held up a flat brown envelope. "Sealed. Unmarked." Valerie's expression darkened. "Don't touch it." Alexander nodded. "Scan it." Cole brought over a small device from the side table. He ran it over the envelope's seams. "No tech, just paper." Valerie took a pair of gloves from her bag, slit the envelope, and opened it carefully. Inside was a single photo. Selina looked over her shoulder and recoiled. It was her, 19 years old, sitting on a hotel bed, wearing a borrowed dress that she remembered clearly cheap, too tight, and given to her by Raymond. In the photo, her eyes looked glassy. Her smile didn't reach her face. Pinned to the photo was a note in block letters. "Memory Lane. Don't forget who made you." Her knees nearly gave out. Alexander caught her by the elbow. Valerie took the photo and slid it into a clear sleeve. "This is a message. They're showing you how deep they're willing to dig." Selina's voice trembled. "I didn't do anything illegal. You don't have to," Valerie said. "This is about shame. About painting you as unstable, reckless, sexualized. They want to turn the public against you. Discredit your voice." Alexander spoke then low, direct. "We release it." Everyone turned to him. "Excuse me?" Valerie asked. "We get ahead of it." he said. We tell the story before they do. The version where she was manipulated, where a 19-year-old was exploited, dressed up, posed. We name the photographer. We ask why she was alone in that room with an officer who called her his girl. Selena looked at him, her jaw tight. You want to use the photo? I want to burn their narrative before it takes root. Valerie hesitated. It's a risk. Selena straightened. Her voice came stronger now. So was everything else I've done. She turned to Valerie. Make sure it's framed as evidence of abuse, not scandal. Valerie nodded. Understood. Oh. Later that day, they held the second press conference. This time, in the rotunda of the Grant Foundation building, a marble space made to feel like a court itself. Selena stood before the podium, flanked by Alexander on one side, Valerie on the other. Reporters buzzed like flies. Microphones blinked red. Selena took a deep breath. Her palms were damp. Her heart thundered. But when she began to speak, her voice was steady. I was 19 when this photo was taken. I thought I was safe. I thought the man in charge of me was protecting me. But now I understand he was staging me, framing me for stories he might need to tell later. And now he is. She held up the photo, protected in glass. This is not a moment of shame. This is a moment of survival. I'm not embarrassed. I'm angry. And I'm not going away. The crowd erupted, flashes, murmurs, a few gasps. But she didn't flinch. Later, when she stepped off the podium, Alexander was waiting. You're becoming dangerous to them, he said with a hint of a smile. Good, Selena replied. Let them feel it. That night, the estate went dark. Power outage. At first, no one panicked. Cole immediately activated backup generators. But as the halls dimmed and the exterior lights cut out, everyone moved into high alert. Alexander was the first to sense something wasn't right. No alerts were tripped, he said, scanning the tablet handed to him by his tech specialist. Which means they didn't cut power. They spoofed the signal. Inside job? Valerie asked. Or someone who knows our systems, Cole muttered. Selena stayed close to Alexander's side as guards moved through the estate, room by room. Then, glass shattered, not far. From the east hallway, Cole pulled his weapon. Stay here. Selena's breath caught, but Alexander shook his head. She doesn't leave my side. They moved quickly, low and tight through the corridor. Selena's bare feet padded softly over marble, her heartbeat louder than her steps. They found the source, a shattered display case. Nothing missing, but something left behind. A small, wire-bound notebook. On the front, a police emblem. On the inside, notes, Marcus Fielding's handwriting, and one line underlined in red. The judge knew. He signed the order. Thorne was just the hand. Selena stepped back, dizzy. The judge, she whispered. They're higher than I thought. Age? Alexander looked at Cole. We were never just dealing with a bad cop. We're staring down a chain of power. Selena looked at the broken glass. Then we pull the chain. Selena sat on the edge of her bed, Marcus Fielding's notebook trembling in her hands. The words she had read only moments ago repeated in her head like a pulse. The judge knew. He signed the order. Thorne was just the hand. A judge. She had spent weeks thinking the system had failed her by accident. But now, it wasn't a failure. It was design. Alexander entered the room, a quiet storm behind his eyes. He shut the door softly but firmly, cutting off the distant hum of estate security sweeping the grounds again. No entry logs were tripped, he said. Whoever got inside knew how to bypass our defenses. Someone with clearance, Selena asked, standing up. Or someone who once had it, he said, his jaw tightening. Cole is running background on all former estate staff and contractors from the past 10 years. Selena handed him the notebook. That page, Marcus said. A judge signed off on what Thorne did. We need to find out who. Alexander nodded, flipping through the worn pages. Some were smudged. A few had blood on the corners. They were real. Untouched since Marcus had disappeared. He wrote in layers. Alexander murmured. Everything's coded. Oh. He held up a page that had several names underlined. 3 crossed out. 1 circled twice. Judge Arnold Greeley, he said. Southern District. Selena's eyes widened. He ruled on 5 of Raymond's arrests. Every time the cases were dismissed on technicalities. Valerie burst into the room without knocking. "Greeley," she said, holding a printed document in her hand. "I just cross-checked with Marcus's file. He was overseeing a sealed case involving a series of dismissed domestic violence charges. Guess who the arresting officer was in 4 out of 5 cases?" "Thorne," Selina said. Valerie nodded. "Greeley's name is on over a dozen questionable rulings, all favoring officers accused of misconduct." Alexander's voice was cold. "Then we follow the paper trail. We hit him with his own ink." They gathered in the estate's lower study, converted temporarily into a war room. Maps lined the walls. A corkboard showed photos of Thorne, Greeley, and 5 other officers Marcus had named before disappearing. Selina stared at the web of string connecting them. "This wasn't just a few bad apples," she said. "This was a system built to protect them, reward them." Valerie laid down a spreadsheet. "We've confirmed 5 known victims beyond Selina. All women of color. All filed complaints. Not one led to prosecution." Alexander looked at the board, and all of those complaints went through Greeley's court. Selina stepped forward, pointing to a photograph. "That's Alina Perez. She was 16. Her case was sealed," Valerie added, "and, mysteriously, she disappeared 6 months later. Her foster records were scrubbed." Selina gritted her teeth. "They didn't just silence her, they erased her." Alexander nodded to Cole. "Find out where Greeley is. If he's smart, he's already cleaning house." 2 hours later, they had an address, a brownstone in the Upper East Side. Not his official residence. A private one, quiet, off the grid, and protected by a private security firm, with ties to retired NYPD brass. Alexander insisted on going himself. Selina didn't object. She insisted on going too. The car ride was quiet. Tension sat between them, thick as fog. As the city lights flickered past, Selina finally spoke. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice low. "You could have walked away 10 times. Let it be someone else's problem." Alexander didn't look at her right away. Then he said, "Because my mother spent her life trusting the system, and it failed her. A man hit her, and no one believed her, because he wore a badge, because we didn't have the money to fight." Selina's throat tightened. Alexander continued, "I built my empire so no one could make me small again. And maybe I forgot, along the way, what that meant, until you reminded me." He finally looked at her. "You asked for help, and you mattered. That should be enough." She didn't reply. But she reached for his hand, and for a moment, silence said everything. They arrived just before midnight. Cole led the team, moving silently up the narrow staircase of the brownstone. Valerie monitored from a parked van, hacking security feeds in real time. "Motion inside," she said in their earpieces. 2 heat signatures, 1 pacing, 1 seated. Alexander gave the signal. They knocked, no answer. Then, a voice from inside. "Go away. I don't talk to media or charity lawyers." Cole knocked again, louder. "Judge Greeley, this is not a request." There was a pause. Then the door opened slowly. Greeley was older than Selina expected. Mid-60s. Neatly groomed. But his eyes were bloodshot. His shirt unbuttoned. He smelled of whiskey and fear. "Who the hell are you?" he slurred. Alexander stepped forward. "The man who just made you very relevant." "Oh." Greeley's eyes flicked toward Selina. "She's the one." "Yes," Alexander said. "She is. And she brought receipts." Selina held up the notebook. Greeley laughed. "You think you can use that? It's inadmissible. Hearsay. No chain of custody." Selina replied, her voice sharper than glass. "It's not the notebook. It's the money transfers, the court orders, the sealed documents, all of which we've already copied." Greeley stepped back, visibly sweating. "You'll ruin lives." "No," she said. "You did that. We're just turning on the lights." Alexander leaned in close, his voice cold. "You have one chance. You come clean, or I use every channel I have to drag you through public hell. I'm a judge." "You were," Alexander said. "Now you're a headline." Greeley sank into the nearest chair. "I want immunity." he said hoarsely. And protection. Valerie's voice came through their earpieces. We can work with that. But he names everyone. Alexander turned to Selina. You okay? She stared at Greeley. No, she said. But I'm ready. Back at the estate, hours later, Selina sat alone in the conservatory. She looked up through the glass ceiling. The stars were hidden behind clouds tonight, but she didn't need them. She wasn't looking for signs anymore. She was the sign. The morning fog hadn't yet lifted when Selina stepped onto the back lawn of the Grant estate, dressed in a long cardigan and slippers, clutching a thermos of coffee. The dew soaked the grass beneath her feet, and the air held that sharp, clean scent of earth waking up. Across the wide expanse of lawn stood a single tree, tall, wide, unmoved by the winds of the night before. Alexander joined her moments later, quiet as always, carrying his own mug. He didn't speak right away, just stood beside her, following her gaze. What is it about this tree? She finally asked. It's called the witness tree, he said, planted by my great-grandfather when the land was still farmland. He said if you stood under it long enough, it would show you who you really were. Selina offered a faint smile. I'm not sure I want to know that. You already do, Alexander said. You're just afraid of what you'll have to do with it. She sipped her coffee in silence. Behind them, inside the house, a storm was already brewing. Valerie was on a call with the Attorney General's office. Her tone was clipped and precise, her eyes dark with calculation. They want to delay, she told the room once she'd hung up. They say they need more time to process the Greeley confession. Selina, sitting beside the fireplace, straightened. You mean they don't want to admit how high this goes? Valerie nodded. They know if they move too quickly, it could collapse more than just one precinct. It could implicate half a dozen judges, several city officials, and a few federal agents who looked the other way. Which means they'll try to isolate Raymond, Cole said. Paint him as the rogue. Cut off the rot just below the surface. Selina felt her fists curl. They want to turn him into a scapegoat, so they can preserve the rest. Alexander stepped forward. Then we force their hand. How? She asked. He looked at Valerie. We schedule a public hearing. Broadcast. Subpoena Greeley as a cooperating witness. Present Marcus's files. And we call Selina to the stand. Live. Valerie's brow rose. That's high risk. And high visibility. Alexander said. They can't cover up what's said on live television. Especially not when the victims are watching. Selina exhaled slowly. You want to put me back on the stand? With the world watching? No, he said. I want to give you the platform they never let you have. Way. Later that evening, as the estate's tech team wired up for the upcoming hearing, Selina stood alone in the library, flipping through a stack of handwritten letters. They were from survivors, women who had seen the broadcast, who had heard her voice. One letter was from a woman in Detroit who said she'd been silenced after reporting an officer's misconduct. Another from a girl in Baltimore who saw herself in Selina's story. All of them wrote the same thing in different words. Thank you for speaking when I couldn't. Selina's throat tightened. She closed the last letter and held it to her chest. She had never imagined herself as a leader. But now, she couldn't step back. The next morning, they drove to the city. The public hearing was held at the Hamilton Civic Auditorium, chosen for its size, security, and visibility. The media was already swarming by the time they arrived. Cameras lined the entrance. Protesters stood on both sides, some holding signs of support. Justice for Selina. Others echoing the smear campaigns. She lied. Gold digger in disguise. Selina stepped out of the car, wearing a dark green suit, tailored but simple. Her hair was pulled back. No makeup beyond the essentials. She wanted to be seen, not dressed up, not dramatized. Just seen. Inside, the chamber was filled. Civil rights lawyers, journalists, victims' advocates, a few political figures pretending not to be watching too closely. Alexander sat in the front row. Valerie was beside the moderator. Cole stood silently at the edge of the stage, watching everyone. Selina took the stand. The cameras clicked as she sat. The moderator spoke. Miss Brooks, you understand you're under oath? Yes, she said. Do you wish to make an opening statement? Selina looked up. I came here because silence almost killed me, she said. I stayed quiet out of fear, but I'm not afraid anymore. She opened Marcus's notebook on the podium. I read these pages, and I hear his voice, a voice they tried to erase, but we're still here. We're not shadows. She pointed toward the gallery. There are people in this room who have lived through what I lived through, who were told their pain was inconvenient, who were silenced with threats, shame, or paperwork. Her voice grew stronger. They said Raymond Thorne was one bad man. He wasn't. He was the result of a system built to protect itself. And now you all have a choice. You can do what's easy or what's right. She stepped back. Silence filled the room. Then, applause, quiet at first, then rising. The kind that came from the heart, not the script. The moderator nodded. Thank you, Miss Brooks. As she stepped down, Alexander stood, not clapping, just watching her like a general watches a rising banner. Outside, the newsfeeds exploded. Selena Brooks testifies live. He was the result of a system. Judge Greeley names names in abuse ring. Whistleblower faces down NYPD shield. Later that night, Selena walked again beneath the witness tree. She looked up into its branches, the wind shifting the leaves gently above. This time, she didn't wonder who she was. She knew. It started with the phone call. Valerie's voice was flat, her words clipped. Our server's been hit. Someone breached the firewall. Aid my appreciata. Selena froze mid-step in the hallway. What did they get? We don't know yet. Cole's team is isolating the damage, but someone knew exactly what they were looking for. This wasn't random. Moments later, the estate snapped into alert mode. Screens blinked red in the security room. Footsteps echoed through marble halls as personnel rushed to their stations, and in the midst of it all, Selena stood silently, watching the system they'd built begin to fray at the edges. Cole found her in the study. His face was taut. They were after Marcus's files, he said. Specifically the ones we didn't release. But we had backups. Not of everything, he admitted. Some of the original audio logs gone. One of the witness transcripts, too. Selena's heart pounded. Are you saying they're erasing him again? Alexander walked in, face stormy. No, he said. Because we're not letting them. Valerie followed behind, holding a printed list. We think the hack originated from a private cybersecurity firm called Gridlock, she said. Guess who funds them? Selena didn't need to ask. Thorne? Valerie shook her head. Worse. A pack that funds judges. Including Greeley. They're closing ranks. Alexander stepped in front of the fireplace, his voice low and steady. They want to bury it all before it hits federal court. The grand jury may have forced their hand, but the public hearing scared them. Now they know the people are watching. Selena crossed her arms. So, what do? We raise the stakes. By nightfall, a live stream was scheduled. Selena had never intended to become a public figure, but now, it wasn't about intention, it was necessity. Valerie prepped her in the studio, powdering the sheen off her forehead, adjusting the mic. Alexander stood behind the camera, arms crossed, silent, but present. We go live in 5, Cole called from the control panel. Selena took one last breath. The red light blinked on. She looked straight into the lens. My name is Selena Brooks, she began. And tonight, I'm not speaking for myself. I'm speaking for every voice they tried to erase. She held up a photo, Alina Perez, then another Lena Hayes, then Marcus. They thought deleting a file would delete a memory. But you can't delete the truth. You can only delay it. And that delay ends now. She paused, letting the words settle. We were never supposed to make it this far, but we did, and we won't stop. The red light clicked off. Silence. Then applause from the small crew. But Selena didn't smile. She knew what would come next. The retaliation arrived the next day. An anonymous article flooded the tabloids. It claimed she had lied about her age, her relationship with Raymond, even the abuse. It posted redacted photos, hinted at a sealed juvenile record, and spun the narrative. Was she a victim or an opportunist? Selena read the headline without blinking. They're scared, Alexander said behind her. They're digging for blood, she replied. Valerie tossed the article onto the table. They think if they make you dirty, they can make the whole movement dirty. Selina stared at the screen, at her own face, distorted through media filters and malice. Let them dig, she said finally. All they'll find is that I survived. And they hate that. But the danger wasn't just online. That night, Selina stepped out into the garden to clear her head. The stars were faint above, and the hum of the city far off. Then she heard it. Footsteps. She turned too late. A figure in black lunged from the hedges, shoving her hard against the wall. She gasped. The air crushed from her lungs. Stay quiet, the man hissed. We're done asking nicely. I distart. But Selina didn't freeze. She fought. She stomped his foot, elbowed him in the ribs, and screamed loud enough for the estate alarms to activate. Seconds later, floodlights bathed the garden in harsh white. The attacker fled, but not fast enough. Cole tackled him at the gate. Guards surrounded them, and Alexander emerged, fury in his eyes. They pulled the mask off. Selina's breath caught. It was one of the officers who had testified against her character during the internal affairs probe, a man named Whitaker. I thought he was fired, she whispered. He was, Alexander said grimly. Which means this wasn't a lone act. Valerie arrived, furious and breathless. They've activated the dark network, she said. Former cops, private contractors, ex-military, the ones who still believe in the old code. Selina wiped blood from her lip. They want me to disappear. ID. Alexander met her gaze. Then we stay louder. The next morning, Greeley's lawyers called. He was ready to cut a deal, real immunity, real testimony. In exchange, he would name every judge, officer, and political donor involved in the protection ring. Selina sat in the negotiation room, staring at him across the glass. He looked smaller now, tired, fragile. I never touched any girls, he muttered. I looked the other way. That's how it happens, she said. Not with monsters, with men who blink. He looked down. I'll name them all, he said. But only if you promise I won't end up dead in my cell. Alexander stepped in. You talk. We protect, Valerie added. But if you lie, we bury you. That night, Selina sat under the witness tree again. This time, she wasn't alone. Other survivors joined her. Women and girls. Some quiet. Some scarred. Some still healing. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. They were the voices that wouldn't go away. Not anymore. At dawn, the first headlines dropped. Retired Judge Greeley names 13 officials in widespread NYPD protection scandal. Selina Brooks' attacker identified as former officer under internal review. Whistleblower movement gains momentum nationwide. The tide wasn't just shifting, it was breaking. In the Grant Estates control room, Valerie scrolled through a live data dashboard showing spikes in public support, with hashtags trending from New York to Chicago, even as far as LA. You've become more than a story, Selina, she said. You're a trigger point. Selina stood behind her, arms crossed. For what? For truth, Valerie said. And fear. You've become what they hoped you'd never be. Undeniable. Alexander entered, carrying a folder stamped with the DOJ seal. Federal oversight begins tomorrow. They're sending a special prosecutor. They want to meet you. Why? Selina asked. Because the system is bleeding, he said, setting the folder on the table. And you're the reason. But outside the walls of the estate, resistance stiffened. A new counter-narrative was gaining traction, fueled by whispers from deep corners of the internet and former law enforcement forums. They called it Project Shieldback, an anonymous movement of former officers and political operatives uniting under one belief, that Selina Brooks and her allies were destroying the foundation of law and order. Cole briefed them over lunch. They're organizing rallies, online doxing campaigns. One of our junior aides had her car vandalized this morning. They're not just trolls, they're coordinated. Valerie's eyes darkened. Domestic extremism dressed in a badge. Thanks for watching. Alexander flipped through a list of names. Some of these men were decorated. Medals, citations, community service awards. And they've chosen this hill to die on. Selina exhaled. Because I broke the image they built. You didn't break it, Alexander said. You held up a mirror. She looked at him. Then let's shatter it. I wed. That afternoon, she sat down with Lila Grant Alexander's estranged sister and a seasoned television producer who had once turned down the chance to run for public office because she didn't want to fake smile for a living. Lila leaned forward, her silver-streaked hair pulled back tight. "You don't want another interview, Selena. You want a broadcast. Live. 1 hour. No commercial breaks. No edits. Just truth. And I want victims to speak too," Selena said. "Real ones. Not sanitized." "That is Juan. You sure?" Lila asked. "It's war once you go live. There's no pulling back." Selena met her eyes. "I haven't pulled back since the day I ran barefoot into this man's life," she said, nodding at Alexander. Lila smiled. "Then let's burn their mask." 3 days later, the special broadcast aired. They titled it, Unfiltered, the Selena Brooks Testimony. No corporate sponsors, no network control. Streamed independently across a dozen platforms with open syndication, Selena walked onto the small, dimly lit stage, greeted by applause from a live audience that included survivors, journalists, and legal experts. Alexander stood in the back, silent but unmissable. The opening moments were still. Then she spoke. "My name is Selena Brooks. I was never supposed to make it here. I was supposed to stay scared, silent, small. But I ran. I asked for help, and someone finally listened." The camera panned to a young woman in the audience. "This is Maya. She's 16. She watched my testimony and told her teacher about an officer who hurt her. He's being investigated now." Applause rose again, but Selena didn't pause. "You see, this was never just about me. It's about the network of silence, the chain of people who knew and looked away." She called out names: Raymond Thorne, Judge Arnold Greeley, Detective Vince Hollard, Deputy Chief Elman Ruiz. Each name echoed like a warning shot. Then she played Marcus Fielding's final voice memo, discovered only 2 nights earlier on a corrupted backup drive Cole had managed to recover. "If you're hearing this, it means they tried to bury me. Don't let them bury you too. Light always wins. But only if someone opens the damn window." Selena stood quietly afterward. Then she said, "This is our window." The room erupted. After the broadcast, the fallout came like fire. Protests outside City Hall doubled in size overnight. The mayor of New York was forced to address the investigation publicly. The commissioner resigned. Judge Greeley entered witness protection, delivering names to a federal task force in exchange for immunity. Raymond Thorne, who had gone silent for days, was found at a private airstrip trying to board a charter flight with a fake passport. Cole had tipped off Homeland Security himself. Alexander told Selena about the arrest over coffee on the estate balcony. "He didn't resist," he said. "Just laughed and said, 'You'll regret turning on your own.'" Selena stared out at the horizon. I was never his, but the victory didn't feel clean. 2 days later, the estate chapel held a memorial for Marcus Fielding. His sister flew in from Atlanta. A few of his former colleagues, those not caught up in the scandal, spoke about his integrity. Selena spoke last. "I never met Marcus in life," she said, "but he was the reason I'm standing here. He chose truth over safety, and that cost him everything." She looked at his photo, framed in soft light. "Let this be the last time we bury a hero in silence." That night, back under the witness tree, Alexander approached her again. The sky was clear. The moon hung heavy above them. "You changed something," he said quietly. Selena smiled sadly. "I just told the truth." "And lit the match," he added. "Now they know the fire's coming." She looked up at the branches. "We still have court." "Yes," he said, "but this time, the world will be watching." She reached out and touched the tree's bark. "This time," she said, "I'm not standing alone." The courtroom was cold not just from the air conditioning, but from the heavy hush that settled over the benches like a fog. Everyone could feel it. This wasn't a trial. This was history, waiting to be written. Selena sat at the witness table, hands folded tightly in her lap. To her left, the prosecutor adjusted his glasses. To her right, Valerie whispered last-minute reminders, names, dates, sequences. But Selena wasn't nervous, not anymore. She had already stood before the world. What remained now was the final strike. Alexander watched from the gallery. Not in the front row this time, he'd chosen the third, behind a row of quiet survivors who had come to support Selina. The decision was deliberate. She wasn't his shadow anymore. She stood in her own light. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Helena Cartwright, a woman with a sharp jaw and a sharper gaze, entered and took her seat. She glanced across the room, acknowledging both legal teams, then looked straight at Selina. "Miss Brooks, you may begin." The prosecutor rose. "Miss Brooks, could you describe the events that led to your first contact with Officer Raymond Thorne?" Selina met his eyes, then turned to the judge. "I was 17, she said. I had just aged out of foster care and was couch surfing. One night, there was a domestic disturbance in the building. Raymond Thorne arrived, but instead of helping, he offered me a ride. Said he could get me a job. I thought he meant well." Her voice was clear, unwavering, but he didn't. That ride was the beginning of 3 years of silence. 3 years of being manipulated, used, threatened. The defense lawyer stood, objecting. Speculation and emotionally charged language. The judge raised a brow. "Overruled." "Continue, Miss Brooks." Selina nodded. "He didn't hurt me at first, not in ways that left bruises, but he isolated me, controlled where I worked, who I talked to. He used fear like a leash." The courtroom was silent, every breath held hostage. Then came the night I tried to leave. He beat me. I filed a report. It vanished. He told me no one would believe me, that he had friends in every room I might walk into. She took a breath. I believed him. Until I didn't. Was it just without? The prosecutor showed the court an image, one of the surveillance screenshots from the night she ran into Alexander's lobby. Barefoot, bleeding. Selina looked down for a moment, then straightened. "That night, I stopped running, because someone finally said, 'What happened to you?' and meant it." Valerie called the next witness, Judge Greeley. The room tensed as he shuffled to the stand, looking older, worn, his cuffs buttoned tightly like armor. His lawyer stayed beside him as he was sworn in. "Judge Greeley," Valerie began, "have you entered into an agreement with the federal government?" "Yes," he said, barely audible. "In exchange for immunity, I provided evidence and testimony of coordinated efforts to dismiss, suppress, and expunge cases involving misconduct. Was Officer Thorne one of those protected?" "Yes." "Did you ever personally intervene in Selina Brooks' complaints?" A pause. "Yes." Valerie stepped closer. "Why?" Greeley's voice cracked. "Because I believed the narrative I was handed, that she was unstable, a hustler. Because I trusted the wrong people, and because I didn't want to see what it said about the system I'd built my career on." When Greeley stepped down, the courtroom buzzed. Some shook their heads. Others just looked tired, like they'd seen too many apologies that came too late. The final witness was unexpected. Valerie called forward a young woman named Kelsey, 24. Soft-spoken, with a scar visible just beneath her sleeve. She hadn't been part of the public wave. She hadn't spoken to press. But now, she stood before the court. "I never told anyone," Kelsey said, her voice shaking. "But Thorne, he used to find girls like me, ones who'd been in shelters. He had ways of making us feel chosen. Then, he'd switch, turn cold, violent. But always, he'd say no one would believe us. Wheel one." She looked at Selina. "Until I saw her speak. Then I knew I wasn't alone." The silence in the room felt sacred. Closing statements followed. The prosecution was precise, factual, but burned with quiet fury. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard not just testimony but patterns. Not just victims but survivors. What happened to Selina Brooks wasn't a personal tragedy. It was a product of institutional rot. And this court today has a choice: to begin repairing that, or to let the mask slip back on." The defense was shorter. They claimed Thorne acted independently. That the system had failed. Yes, but not maliciously. They painted him as broken, not evil. No one clapped when they finished. The jury deliberated for 2 days. During that time, Selina stayed at the estate, refusing to check the news. Instead, she spent time in the garden, with Maya, with the other women, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting. When the call came, She was under the witness tree. Alexander picked it up, listened, then lowered the phone. "They're ready," he said. The courtroom was packed for the verdict. Selina stood as the jury foreperson read each charge. On the count of conspiracy to obstruct justice, guilty. On the count of aggravated assault, guilty. On the count of abuse of power under color of authority, guilty. On all remaining counts, guilty. Gasps. Some tears. But no outbursts. Thorne sat stone-faced at the defense table. Selina didn't look at him, not once. Outside, the city thundered with response. But Selina didn't speak at the press conference that followed. She didn't need to. Her face was on every screen, her voice already in every home. Later that night, Alexander found her in the study. Alone. "You did it," he said. "No," she replied. "We did. All of us." He stepped closer. "So what now?" She looked up at him. "We rebuild. From truth. From pain. From scratch, if we have to. But never again from silence." He nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Then let's begin." The days following the verdict passed in a blur of news cameras, interviews, and speeches. Every corner of the city seemed to hum with the aftermath of justice finally spoken out loud. People took to the streets not just in protest anymore but in solidarity. Candlelight vigils lined the courthouse steps. Murals of Selina appeared on the walls of Brooklyn, Harlem, and the Bronx. And in the middle of it all, Selina stood still, absorbing it not as a victory but as a burden carried forward. It wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Alexander watched from the back of the crowded community center as Selina took the stage at the newly founded Fielding Justice Initiative, named in honor of Marcus Fielding. The auditorium buzzed with survivors, advocates, social workers, and students who'd once believed justice was reserved for the rich, the loud, or the lucky. Selina spoke with a soft but steady voice. "We built this house out of broken stories. We named it for a man who gave his life so that people like me and like you could stop running." Her hand trembled slightly as she held a photo of Marcus to her chest. "This is not about one trial, or one man going to prison. This is about what happens next when the spotlight fades, when the news cycle moves on. And we're still here, still fighting, still believing that justice isn't a privilege, it's a promise." The crowd erupted into applause, not wild, but firm, earnest, true. And in the back row, Alexander clapped slowly, his gaze fixed on her not with pride, but with something gentler, respect. Later that night, back at the estate, Selina walked barefoot through the halls, her heels abandoned by the door. The air was quiet, the kind of quiet that had nothing to do with silence and everything to do with peace. She stepped into the study, where a fire still crackled softly in the hearth. On the mantel sat a small box, hand-carved oak, with a gold latch. Alexander was already inside, seated on the couch. He gestured toward the box. "It's yours." Selina hesitated. "What is it?" "A record," he said, "of every testimony, every file, every name, backed up, encrypted, yours to keep, yours to protect." She opened the box slowly. Inside were 2 flash drives, a stack of printed documents, and a photograph. Marcus, smiling with a cup of coffee in hand. Selina sat beside him. "We never got to thank him," she whispered. Alexander nodded. "Then let this place do it for us." The next morning, the work began. Fielding House, named in full for the initiative, opened its first free legal clinic in an old renovated post office near the Bronx River. Its mission was simple: protect the unheard. Within weeks, lines formed around the block. Not for handouts, but for hope. Selina met every new visitor herself. A mother fleeing abuse, a teenager harassed by a school officer, a father wrongly accused. She didn't offer them magic. She offered them process, voice, dignity. But the world outside wasn't finished fighting. One afternoon, a staffer rushed into the office, breathless. "Selina, you need to see this." They flipped on the TV. A well-known conservative pundit was speaking live. "She's no savior," the man barked. "She's a social experiment gone too far. Law enforcement is under siege. The pendulum has swung dangerously left." Selina watched without flinching. She'd expected it. Valerie entered moments later, holding a legal notice. "They've filed a countersuit. A civil challenge from Thorne's old precinct. claiming reputational damage and lost funding due to your accusations. Selina leaned back in her chair. So now they want to punish the truth because it was loud. Valerie smirked. Let them come. That evening, Selina and Alexander walked the grounds. The leaves were starting to turn, golden against the late autumn air. I keep waiting for it to feel finished, she admitted. For that moment of arrival. But it doesn't come. Alexander didn't answer right away. Then, he said, that's because this isn't a chapter that ends. This is one you choose to live in. Every day. His tended. She looked at him, eyes steady. You ever regret helping me? No, he said. Helping you helped me. I just regret how long it took. They stopped beneath the witness tree. It had grown since spring. Or maybe it only seemed that way. Selina touched the bark. I used to think justice was a thing you won, like a prize. And now? Now I know it's something you protect, like a seed. It is. Inside, the team was already planning the next steps. Opening clinics in Chicago and Atlanta, expanding education workshops, building alliances with other watchdog organizations. But Selina took one last moment alone in the chapel. She lit a candle for Marcus, for Alina, for all the names no one would ever know, whose files never reached a desk, whose stories never made a headline, and she whispered, I didn't forget. Then she blew out the match. Later, as the estate wound down, Alexander found her reading on the balcony. A letter in her lap, unopened. He raised a brow. She handed it to him. It's from Raymond, she said. From prison. Alexander didn't open it. Do you want to read it? Selina shook her head. No, she said. He had his chance to speak when it mattered. I'm done giving him my silence. She looked out at the horizon. There was no applause. No music swelling in the background, just the wind and the soft glow of a future she wasn't afraid to walk into anymore. The early snow had come to New York in delicate waves, blanketing streets, silencing traffic, softening even the hard edges of the city's memory. Selina stood by the tall windows of Fielding House's newly opened Brooklyn satellite office, her breath fogging the glass as she watched volunteers stack crates of winter clothes for new arrivals. There was a rhythm now, a strange, beautiful rhythm of rebuilding. Every day, another story found its way to their door. A mother fighting to keep custody from a corrupt social worker. A veteran whose claims had been buried under bureaucratic shame. A boy who filmed his own beating when no one else would. Selina didn't fix all of them. She couldn't. But she listened. And for most, that was already a revolution. That morning, a familiar name re-emerged. Valerie barged into Selina's office, coat still dusted with snow. You need to see this. She held out a printed court notice. Selina took it slowly, reading each word like it might catch fire. Raymond Thorne had filed a motion from prison, an appeal, citing undue media prejudice and coercion of witnesses. His new attorney was aggressive, well-funded, and rumored to be tied to Shieldback, the underground network still alive and twitching in corners of the justice system. Selina set the paper down, her jaw tight. They won't stop until they rewrite history, she murmured. They want to turn you into a footnote, Valerie agreed. Discredit the verdict. Make it look like a witch hunt. Selina folded her hands. Then we remind them why the fire started. That evening, she returned to the estate not for rest, but for war. Alexander had already begun preparations. Maps on the table, whiteboards filled with timelines, names, call logs. Cole was briefing security on new digital threats. Even the old mansion seemed to vibrate with focus, like it knew the ghosts of justice weren't done pacing its halls. Selina walked into the war room with the stillness of a veteran. Let's pull every statement, she said. Every document, every witness. We show the world there was no coercion, just clarity. Valerie nodded. And we go one step further. She opened a file marked confidential. We've found the lawyer's link to a private lobbying group known for burying misconduct cases. If we expose them before the appeal hearing, the judge may not even allow the motion to stand. Alexander raised a brow. You sure you want to strike first? Selina met his gaze. I'm not waiting for the storm anymore. I am the storm. 3 days later, Selina stood again in front of cameras, this time at a press conference in front of the very courthouse where Raymond had once stood. smirking behind his expensive attorney. "Today," she began, "we reveal not just the truth of a man's crimes, but the truth of a system that tried to buy his freedom again." She held up a printed email, one connecting Thorne's new lawyer to financial contributions made to judges on similar cases. "This is not a matter of opinion," she continued. "It's not politics. It's math. It's money. It's a ledger of silence bought and paid for. No dramatics, no tears, just evidence, just heat. The kind of heat that melted even the coldest judicial hearts." Back inside, Selina faced her first real flash of doubt in weeks. In her private sitting room, alone at last, she held Marcus's journal again. It was creased now, worn from all the readings and references. She opened a page she hadn't read before. Sometimes, the walls remember. They remember who screamed, who knocked, who was turned away, and they whisper, "Not yet. Not done." She closed the book, then picked up her phone and dialed a number she never thought she would. "Mrs. Ramirez," she said gently. The woman on the other end sniffled. "Yes? This is Selina Brooks. You gave testimony in the Thorne case, but they sealed your statement. I wanted you to know he's trying again. And I'd understand if you don't want to go through this. But, I'll speak," the woman interrupted. Her voice didn't tremble this time. "He doesn't get to rewrite the story." Selina smiled, just barely. "Thank you." The appeal hearing was set for January 17th, in a historic courtroom uptown, larger, colder, designed to intimidate. But this time, Selina didn't walk in alone. She was joined by Valerie, Alexander, Cole, 24 survivors, and the families of 3 women who had died before they could testify. Even the press had changed. Less tabloid, more truth. And when the judge, an elder statesman with a reputation for being unshakable, asked for opening remarks, it was Selina who rose, unprompted, to speak. "Your Honor," she said, "this is not about whether Raymond Thorne had a fair trial. It's about whether fairness can be weaponized against justice. We followed the law. We presented truth. And now, we ask that the court do what the system failed to do for so long. Stand firm." The judge studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Motion to dismiss the appeal is under review." Selina returned to her seat. Alexander leaned over, whispering, "No matter what happens, this was never about him." She nodded. "It's about who's watching." That night, snow fell again, this time heavy and unrelenting. Selina stood in the garden beneath the witness tree, wrapped in a long coat. The tree looked ancient now, branches bare but strong. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metal badge, one of Raymond's, confiscated, logged, now returned to her by request. She placed it gently into a shallow hole at the tree's roots, then covered it with dirt. No ceremony, no eulogy, just closure. When she stood, Alexander was waiting by the path. "Ready?" he asked. She looked up at the stars breaking through the storm clouds. Always. Winter clung to the city like memory, stubborn, quiet, and not ready to let go. The final chapter of Raymond Thorne's appeal came down on a Tuesday, delivered in a single-page decision from the appellate court. Motion denied. No hearing. No reconsideration. The case was closed. For good. Selina stared at the court notice in her hands. There was no elation, no burst of triumph. Only the deep, anchoring weight of resolution. It was over. The long arc of this fight, bloody, blistered, brutal, had landed where it belonged. She folded the letter, slid it into Marcus's journal, and closed it. A knock sounded at the door. Alexander entered, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "So," he said gently, "do we breathe now?" She smiled faintly. "Do we remember how?" He handed her the mug and joined her on the couch. "It was never supposed to happen like this," he said. "A housekeeper. A billionaire. A corrupt cop. A whistleblower. It reads like fiction." "But it wasn't," Selina said. "That's the whole point." That evening, Fielding House hosted a private gathering. Not a gala, not a fundraiser, a remembrance. Valerie stood near the entrance, greeting guests with her usual cool efficiency. Cole moved between rooms, checking security. Lila Grant sat with a group of young journalists, sharing hard-won lessons about truth and risk. Selina stood in front of a framed wall now known as The Voices, a mosaic of photos, names, and words from survivors across the country who had written letters, sent emails, called late at night. At the center of it all was Marcus, his picture slightly larger, his quote engraved in bronze. Truth doesn't shout, it waits, and when it speaks, everything changes. Selina placed her hand on the frame, silent, then turned to the crowd. She spoke without a mic. "I don't know if I have anything new to say," she began. "Only that. We did this. Not one person. All of us. The ones who spoke. The ones who marched. The ones who believed. Even when it cost them everything." A murmur of assent passed through the room. "They tried to make me into a symbol," she continued. "But symbols are still. They don't move. They don't grow. I'm not here to be remembered. I'm here to keep going." Applause rose, gentle but full. "And I hope," she finished, voice lower, "that no one ever again has to scream, 'Please, help me, sir,' and wonder if someone will answer." After the event, she found herself walking the halls of the estate, just as she had that first night, when her life had changed in a heartbeat. But now, she knew the rooms by memory, the creak of the oak stairs, the smell of old books in the study, the way the light hit the windows just before dusk. Alexander joined her in the corridor, watching her quietly. "You built something permanent here," he said. "I built something loud," she replied, "and sometimes that's what change sounds like." He nodded. "People keep asking what's next. A Senate run. A book. A foundation in your name." Selina gave a small, ironic smile. "Funny how surviving turns into branding." "So what is next?" he asked. She stopped near the balcony, looking out at the city below. "I want peace," she said. "Not for me. For the girl I was, the one who hid under floors and behind lies. She earned it." He didn't speak, just stood with her. A moment passed. Then she added, "But I won't disappear. I never thought you would." In the months that followed, Fielding House expanded into 5 cities. Selina launched a nationwide mentorship program for young women exiting the foster system. Valerie joined the board of a judicial accountability coalition. Cole accepted a cybersecurity grant to help nonprofits protect vulnerable information. And Alexander finally stepped away from the corporate empire he had built, choosing instead to invest in systems of justice that couldn't be bought. But more than any program or building or award, what mattered most was this. People listened now. When women spoke, when survivors stood, when the broken pointed toward the ones who broke them, people listened. On the 1-year anniversary of the trial, Selina stood once more beneath the witness tree. The estate had turned the grounds into a community garden. Children laughed in the distance. Volunteers pulled weeds, planted new things. She placed a small stone at the base of the tree. It read, "Still here." As she straightened, a familiar voice called out, "Miss Brooks?" She turned. A young woman, early 20s, nerves dancing across her face, stood at the edge of the path. I wanted to say thank you," the girl said, "for everything." Selina walked toward her. "What's your name?" "Jasmine," she said. "I'm applying to law school. I watched your testimony every night for a week before I hit submit." Selina smiled. "Well, then I guess we're not done after all." Jasmine laughed, the kind of laugh that cracked something open. They walked together toward the garden. Later, in a quiet moment, Selina sat on the estate steps, eyes closed, face turned toward the winter sun. A voice echoed in her mind, Marcus's. "They'll try to silence you. But silence is a coward's currency. You spend it enough, and all you buy is regret." She opened her eyes, and stood, not as a symbol, not as a victim, but as a woman who had burned through fear and come out the other side. Still standing, always standing. The story of Selina Brooks reminds us that silence is never neutral. It either protects the truth or empowers injustice. When one woman chose to speak, she didn't just reclaim her voice, she opened the door for countless others. Justice isn't always swift or clean, but when built on truth, it endures. The greatest power lies not in wealth or titles, but in the courage to stand up when everyone else stays seated. And sometimes, one "please help me" is enough to change the world if someone chooses to listen.